Hello there, and welcome to Doctor Who Radio Show. I'm That's the Way It Goes 9, and this lovely chap is
Jimmy Porto from upstate New York.
the legendary upstate New York. And in this episode of Doctor Who Radio Show, which is now available on Turtles, would you believe? Yeah, you can download it on a Turtles back now. We shall be looking at the best Doctor Who stories never made, i.e. stories that were going to be made, but for one reason or another, such as, Sharda, they weren't made. So let's go all the way back to 1993, the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who, 20 years ago now, oddly enough, when there were 7 Doctors, not 11, and the story that would have been in the place of the shitty Dimensions in Time, no bias there then, the Dark Dimension. What do you know about the Dark Dimension, Monk?
Oh, I haven't heard about Dark Dimension in a long time. You'll have to refresh my memory on that one.
Well, it would have featured the remaining 4, 5, 6, 7 Doctors, and it would have been a 30th anniversary featuring a unregenerated 4th Doctor. Rick Mail was supposed to play this character Hotspur, who prevented him from regenerating at the end of Logopolis, so he changed the entire history of the Doctor. It would have featured brand new Cybermen, a spruced up, like a sort of special weapon Dalek, basically, more bulkier weaponry. And all the other Doctors, 5 to 7, would have been in cameos.
Yeah, that's right. Colin Baker and John Pertwee weren't happy because their roles were nothing but cameos.
Oh,
and
yes, it featured number 3. Sorry, go on.
And the story was to feature an older version of the 4th Doctor, played by Tom Baker, an older version of the Brigadier, and an older version of Ace, all played by the same actors. And Pertwee and Colin Baker in particular were not happy to be cameos. I guess Sylvester McCoy didn't mind, nor did Peter Davison. But Baker and Colin Baker and John Pertwee didn't like that.
That's what I heard. They were a little bit miffed that they'd basically been delegated to a smaller role.
Yep, like walk-ons, if anything.
That's sort of the main gripe from what I read afterwards from interviews with John Pertwee years and years later, and Sylvester McCoy as well. They wouldn't have been meeting each other, as far as I can tell, past selves.
I don't think that any of the characters were to interact with each other, so you wouldn't see 2 Doctors on the screen or more.
Ah, so do you think it would have been like they would have their own little adventure segments or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, have you seen the designs of the sort of horror-like Cybermen?
I did. In fact, there are pictures of it on YouTube. Not YouTube. There are pictures of it. If you do a Google search, you can find pictures of it.
Ah, bloody hell.
They were actually created by Jim Henson's Creature Workshop.
Really? Holy
Yep.
smokes. Jim Henderson, the Jim Henderson.
Yep, the Jim Henson. His Henson's Creature Workshops designed the Cybermen for that episode.
Wow. They do look sort of... Oh, yes, of course. They're like bony Cybermen or something.
Yeah, they were kind of like a mechanized skeleton.
Yeah, influenced by the Terminator in Terminator Judgment Day, that had a silvering sort of coating that could morph and stuff. And perhaps, like I said, sort of horror type element. And it's a rather interesting departure for the Cybermen.
Yep. It would have made the Cybermen look real scary.
Yeah, they've never done that with the TV one before or since, which is curious.
No, I never did. Maybe whoever designed it owns the copyright on it, and they don't want to pay him.
I don't think it would even be something that Russell T Davies or Steve. Well, maybe Stephen Moffat would use something similar. Why do you think they went for that design at Jim Henderson?
I don't know. Maybe at that time he was the one. He had been making a lot of movies like Dark Crystal, Labyrinth. Maybe they thought he was the one making the monsters at that time for movies.
Ah. Well, the Cybermen are basically a abomination, if you like, of humans who use technology, just like we're doing now, oddly enough, a little bit, replacing limbs more and more. So I suppose in a parallel universe, they might have gone as far as manipulating human bone structure. Oh, wow. If anyone who's listening to this has actually seen the pictures of those Cybermen, they are very impressive. A very clever spin on the whole idea. And, on an alien, misty planet, they would have fitted in perfectly in the Patrick Troughton era. Coming out of the shadows. Holy smokes. And then there's the Daleks there was the sort of like spider CGI one that came later, but these were supposed to be sort of army-like, with extra weapons on them or something like that. But I don't think there's really too much about Dark Dimension we know about. But it was all set to go at one
No,
point.
it would have also have had the Ice Warriors and the Yeti.
Ah, redesigned or?
And that I don't know. But we would have also seen on screen Bernice Summerfield, who is a companion to the Seventh Doctor in the New Adventure book series.
Ah, not Ace then.
Well, Ace was going to be in it too, but Bernice Summerfield, who was never seen on screen before, would have been in it.
Ah, not that many years after she was originally created for those novels.
Right.
Holy smokes. I have seen a design of the Ice Warriors, which is way better than the ones we've had recently in Cold War. And from what I remember, bear in mind, viewers, this is from years and years ago, reading. I've been reading Doctor Who magazines since 1988. And there was one instance where they, like many stories, brilliant magazine, 30 odd years. When did it start? Oh yeah, over 30 years now, I think, that magazine's been going. But they do lots of articles where they, examine, every facet of each story. And in this case, they looked at some of the redesigns for the Ice Warriors. They were more sort of reptilian in design, far more thinner, and just like the Cybermen, just like Monks had said, sort of Jim Henderson type, more visual, more scary, oddly enough. Perhaps a little bit more Hammer horror, I suppose. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, really. But the question is, how do you think this would have translated to the screen?
Well, all the actors, of course, in the 90s would have been a lot younger then. The idea of the story, the plot, was that time was altered by an evil creature so that the Fourth Doctor would not have died and regenerated. In doing so, the creature, who was called a Dark Dimension, prevented the Doctor's future incarnations. So the Fourth Doctor, has to revert back the timeline so that his future incarnations would not be erased from history.
Ah, yeah.
Thus giving him meaning to his death. He dies so that his future incarnations would live.
I think in one version it was the Master keeping him in a cage or something, keep him alive. Yeah, that was a bit horrific.
So all the actors would have been younger. It would basically, I think Pertwee and Colin Baker were correct. It sounds like it would have been basically a Fourth Doctor adventure, with everyone else being cameos. I don't know if the fans would have enjoyed. They would have enjoyed seeing the Fourth Doctor back for one more adventure, but I don't think they'd enjoy seeing all the Doctors just walk on cameo bits.
But alas, it was cancelled, lack of money, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know the deal with the BBC. And we got the classic Dimensions in Time instead, didn't we? I mean, that was essentially the same things, which wasn't too bad, but really, it was really emphasised their attitude to Doctor Who, basically.
That was in 3D. But they weren't thinking of the overseas fans because they incorporated Dimensions in Time with a British soap opera. EastEnders, was it?
Oh, yes, EastEnders.
And no one outside of England would have known who these characters. I didn't know who they when I was watching it. Oh, why are they doing this? I didn't even know it was a British soap opera.
Well, that was sold to America, but it's, the gloominess when it started up to 1993 wouldn't have gone down well with the American viewers, basically.
The 3D effects. I have the red and blue 3D glasses, but even with the red and blue 3D glasses, the 3D effects didn't look so good.
Yeah, very 1990s.
Yeah.
A clever experiment, though, which oddly enough they're doing again this year.
Yeah, 3D.
Oh dear.
I did like that all the Doctors were in it. I did like seeing Colin Baker's Doctor meet the Brigadier. I thought John Pertwee and Peter Davison were terrific in it, as well as Sylvester McCoy and Ace.
Considering what they had to, work with, I think they were miracles. But speaking of John Pertwee, there is another story that was never made, which I think we need to talk about. The original story that would have written out Roger Delgado's Master. The final game.
Yeah, too bad he died in a car accident. He was a passenger too. I think the cabbie was drunk.
Really? Oh.
According to an interview with John Pertwee.
The idea...
Him and Delgado were great friends.
Well, he would have died a noble death.
The story, the final game, would have revealed that the Doctor and the Master were actually brothers.
Oh shit.
Or it could have been that the Master was actually the Doctor's darker personality.
Oh, of course, yes. That's the idea. The Master was the id of the Doctor's sort of ego or something like that.
Yeah.
So the Master's like an extension of his id.
Now in Logopolis, the Master being the Doctor's dark half was alluded to when the Fourth Doctor implied this to Adric and to Nyssa.
I see. Well, that's rather curious because this story was replaced by Planet of the Spiders and featured Kismet, the wife of Roger Delgado, as the Queen Spider's voice. And that did actually feature a similar premise, that the Doctor's downfall was his greed of knowledge. Because, he stole the Metabedis crystal in the Green Death. So a similar plot. The only difference here, though, the Master is, part of his psyche. He's like a sort of, a projection of, the Watcher or something like that. But more about his personality and his, what makes him tick, what his ego, what drives him, that sort of thing. Taking physical shape, he said, just managing to figure out what he was going to say. But is there anything else about this? Because he would have
Well,
sacrificed himself as a fact.
he dies sacrificing himself to save the life of the Doctor. And that's, well, we don't know what happened to the
Hmm.
Master, but in The End of Time, John Sims' Master, does he sacrifice himself to save the Tennant's Doctor? He,
Ah.
we really don't know what happened to the Master, if he sacrificed himself to save the Doctor or not. But it's very similar to the final game, where the Master does sacrifice himself to save the Doctor.
I think it sort of influenced several stories later on,
Yep.
sort of suggesting really that the Master, oddly enough, isn't totally unredeemable to a certain extent. At
That
least,
would have been.
hmm.
I was just going to say the final game would have been a great story, because Delgado and Pertwee were always together. Always great together on screen. Great chemistry.
It would have been perhaps, in a strange way, another example of, the Doctor Master being Sherlock Holmes Moriarty.
Yeah.
It would have been their Ratchet Falls, isn't it?
Yeah. They've
The
always
final problem.
Pertwee and the Master always reminded me of Holmes and Moriarty.
That was the intention originally, according to Barry Letts. He would be, Barry Letts and Terence Dick's attitude was that if an idea is good, borrow it basically. And this was their Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. He's the Doctor's equal. Like Batman and the Joker, basically. You know, the Joker never gets killed by Batman completely or gone for good, because without the Joker or without the Master, the Doctor would no longer have, the dark to his light, so to speak.
Right.
But of course, he died. Roger de Gargo died
Yeah.
and changed the
Right.
entire history of it all. Do you think if the Master had been written out in that episode, the whole, you know, him going past his 12th body would have ever happened?
I think that maybe when they got around to doing the Five Doctors, they would have pulled Delgado from an earlier time before he died to save the Doctor. But I don't between Pertwee's Doctor and the Five Doctors, I wonder if we would even have a Master. And if we did, how would they'd have to come up with a way to explain it. Would it still be Delgado? Would it be a different actor? If they didn't have a Master between Pertwee and the Five Doctors, then the Fourth Doctor's death would be rewritten. He'd be up against a different enemy. He wouldn't be up against the Master.
I don't think that would have made too much difference, because after Planet of the Spiders, the Master didn't appear at all, hardly. He was basically considered a remnant of the Unit family. And speaking of the Fourth Doctor era, we go on to our third and final never made story. In this case, a cinematic Fourth Doctor story with Harry and Sarah Jane Smith, actually written between breaks in filming, apparently, by Ian Martin and Tom Baker. Doctor Who and Scratchman.
Yep. It was to feature Vincent Price and Twiggy.
Twiggy?
Yes, famous British fashion model, Twiggy.
Well, I know who she is, but who was she playing?
Oh, who she was to play, I don't know. I just know that Vincent Price and Twiggy were to be in the movie.
Ah. Oh, Vincent Price as the devil himself.
Probably.
Whoa, that would have been pretty cool. Just imagine Vincent Price and Tom Baker sharing scenes. Holy smokes.
Oh, yeah.
So this was supposed to be... Was there any plot for this story at all?
The plot is long. The plot is two Americans, Griffin and his younger colleague, Potts, are in the Space Records Bureau in a room with the door marked Time Lords. They're looking through a section labeled Doctor Who, intent on finding any information about him. Then
Ah,
it switches to present-day London Airport, where a crowd of journalists, teenagers, and dignitaries surround the area with policemen struggling to maintain order. Beyond the runway, the TARDIS materializes on a small dip in the ground. The Doctor looks out to see the spectacle in the distance, and he thinks it's for him, when it's in fact for a pop star that arrived there. The Doctor, Sarah, and Harry then set off to Scotland, 1924, while singing "Yes, We Have No Bananas." When they arrive, a shepherd tending to his sheep sees the TARDIS materialize and runs away. They come out, they see a spot to have a picnic, they find a place on the beach and start to play a game of cricket, with Sarah throwing the ball, overshooting the target, and three head out to search for the ball. The Doctor searches through a nearby field for the ball, hears a strange sound of bones crackling in the distance. He finds an unusual well-dressed scarecrow in the middle of the field holding the ball.
balls, as Matt
And
would
then it
say.
goes on from there.
Ah, sounds a bit wacko, crazy. But actually written by the Doctor himself at the time
Yeah.
and the companion. Holy smokes.
Yeah, Ian Barter and Tom Baker, but I have no idea why it was never made.
I believe it was due to. Here we go, everybody, just like Dark Dimension. All together now. Lack of funding, lack of funding, lack of funding, lack of funding. Just imagine lots of people saying lack of funding in unison. Yes, they actually took it to the producers of Doctor Who at the time, and they thought it was a good idea and tried to get help to get it made, um, and even had approval of the BBC because it would have been just like, well, it would have been like the Peter Cushing movies, except it would have actually had the then current Doctor. Hmm. And it featured the Daleks as well, I believe. That would have been interesting.
Yep, it featured the Daleks and a small cameo by the Cybermen.
A small what?
Cameo.
Oh, a cameo by who?
The Cybermen.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yep.
ah, that would have been. Do you think in this film version they would have looked like Revenge of the Cybermen or been tweaked?
They would have tweaked it up somehow because it was going to be a major motion picture.
I mean, sort of like the Peter Cushing movies. They had, jets of steam, coming
Yeah.
out of the thing, that sort of thing. Yeah. Oh, that would have been good. Perhaps a total redesign, perhaps a sort of Frankenstein type redesign, similar to the ectoskeleton horror Jim Henson from the Dark Dimension one, maybe.
Maybe.
Hmm.
Could be.
Ah, or would they have hashed it up? Would this is a 70s British film, so this might have been still looking a little bit cheap, possibly.
They made a movie poster for it.
Did they really? Oh,
Yeah.
smoke! Oh, so this was all just like Dark Dimension and also the final game. That it would have been, not that many stages from actually going into production.
They they got as far as designing the poster. That's about it. Maybe they had the poster designed when they submitted the idea for with their script. I don't know.
Ah, holy smokes!
As a way to sell the script.
Whoa, blimey! And that's the common denominator, really, with all these three stories we talked about. They have all been just like Trial of the Time Lords original season, literally all planned out. Or at least a rough sketch of what was going to happen. You know, and then for one reason, all together now in unison, due to budget constraints or something like that.
Lack of funding.
Or the greatest words that you can ever say to a Whovian. Michael Grade, he said. Um, so that's a good question. As a film, how much box office appeal do you think it would have had, considering that according to some people, Nicholas Courtney in the 1993 audio. Fuck. I'll do it. Bear in mind that at the time, ratings-wise and popularity-wise, Tom Baker was going right through the roof, just like the Daleks did in the 60s.
But it depends what year it came out. Around 1977, 78 in the United States, it would have been very popular because that's when we started getting Doctor Who.
This would have been 75, 76 or something. So the Fourth Doctor's literally just become really, really popular. Plus, it's during those classic stories, the Massacre of Mangora, or the Hinkley era, when the writers and the production was really good.
Yeah.
So basically, in a nutshell, it's literally when Doctor Who was at the peak of its quality and peak of its popularity. So how would that translate, in Brits and Americans perhaps shelling out their dimes and at the time?
I know it would have been a hit in this country.
Oh really?
I don't know if it would have been a hit in England. I'm assuming it would be because Baker was a very popular Doctor. In this country, it would have been a hit.
I think in Britain it would have done really well if it was released at just the right time. I think it would have definitely have had an effect on stories after when it was filmed and shown in the cinemas. It would have changed the whole course. Even the companions chosen later on, I bet.
And with the money they made on the film, they could have put that back into the series. They could have improved the special effects, the cameras, and everything about the series. In fact, the reason back in the 60s when they had Batman TV series, they made the Batman movie just so that they could build things and have the budget for it to build things that they would then use in the TV series, like the Bat Boat and the Bat Copter. In order to get the money to build that, they made the movie.
I see. So, like the 60s Batman.
Yeah, the 60s Batman. They made the Batman movie at the same time as the series so that they would have a bigger budget, build these things, and then use them later in the series.
But that featured... I did a podcast with Mike Shannon on Batman, and we mentioned that, and I pointed out that in those movies, they featured several villains together. And all of it, all the actors, all the style of the TV series. So presumably, unless they had a different producer or a different director, they would have perhaps a big budget feature length version of the Doctor Who TV series.
Mm-hmm.
Only without the introduction sequence, perhaps, sort of more like a more I don't know how to describe it. I can't really predict it. You can imagine the 70s type thing, they would have had some ghastly theme tune version of the Doctor Who theme tune or something like that. But they would have perhaps a different console or something like that.
Maybe change the interior to the TARDIS.
Here's a good question for you. This feature-length Doctor Who adventure with Scratchman, the Daleks, the Cybermen.
Oh yeah.
Would this, do you think, just like the Batman 60s movies, tied in, like the X-Files films did when the show was still on? Do you think that would have tied in with the actual Doctor Who TV series at the time?
Yes, they would, because it would have been the Doctor and the same actor playing the Doctor, the same actor playing the companions, same TARDIS on the outside at least. So I think it would have tied in very well with the TV series at the time.
Plus blessing of the actual producers.
It would have been great if they made it.
If only. Fans did try to raise money for it as well, So it was the first instance of fandom coming to the rescue, or trying to.
Yeah. Or trying to, yeah.
Which wouldn't actually be the first time ever. It would have been the first instance, just like Star Trek, of fans actually petitioning and using their might, so to speak. But in this case, being British, things fell apart horribly. Oh, Gordon Bennett, just imagine that. Tom Baker on the big screen, doing his Fourth Doctor thing, in scenes with Vincent Price on a gigantic silver screen in front of an entire auditorium. Bellowing.
It's been great.
So oddly enough, 75, 76, we would have seen what we're going to see this year with the 50th anniversary being released in cinemas. So bizarrely, the 50th anniversary story has a bit of both this Unmade story and also Dark Dimension and a little bit of Dimensions in Time. So, in essence, not a case really of the moment has been prepared for, but the moment has been severely buggered up. Or in the case of Dark Dimension, the moment has been purposely altered. It's the end, but the moment has not quite yet, Doctor. That's something. Well, brilliant. Now, I'll just point out here, Big Finish have done lots of audio versions of the Unmade stories from the first, second, I believe, not the third, the fourth, fifth, sixth, and even seventh eras of Doctor Who. So there is no reason, since they've done the Ultimate Adventure, for all these stories, The Final Game, Scratchman, Dark Dimension, being done.
No. It'd just be done with a different Doctor. It'd be done with the 12.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Or it might not be done at all due to budget constraints.
Yeah. Especially Scratchman, because there was the big finale was to take place on a huge pinball machine.
A pinball machine?
A huge, gigantic pinball machine.
Sorry, am I high, or did you say the finale would take place in a huge pinball machine?
Yep, a huge, gigantic pinball machine.
Oh dear. Oh, of course, yeah. Was Tommy released in the mid-70s? I believe it was. Or...
Yeah, it was. Tommy was early 70s. Tommy was early 70s.
Holy smokes. And this was around the time that Vincent Price had, a few years back, had done Witchfinder General, I believe it was, or something like that. The Devil Rides Out as well. So that gives you an idea of how it would have been. Except it would have had a little bit of Tom Bakery baked. This would have gone down perfectly with stoners, wouldn't it? A bunch of hippies in this cinema watching all this madness going on. Vincent Price, Tom Baker, Daleks, pinball machine, off their heads on God knows what. Whoa, hey man, whoa. That'd have been fantastic. Doctor Who gives the stoner generation something.
Watch out for that ball, Doctor.
Whoa, man.
Wow, look at the who.
And of course it was Cheek and Chong eras, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah, it was.
They could have had them make an appearance or something. Cheek and Chong could have been in the Dalek console control room or something.
Hey man, it's big on the inside, but it is on the out.
Whoa, chill out, man. Talk about exterminating people. Woo.
Time travel, man. Time travel, man.
Anyway, that was bogus and tremendous and radical, dude. But that's the way it goes. 09, or was it Doctor Who radio show? I don't know. And this has been my compadre,
Jimmy Porter from upstate New York.
my cheek to my chong. And until next time, I'm just going to load up this bong, and I'll see you for another episode of Doctor Who radio show. Keep hooing, or whoa, dude.